welcome to the program, mate.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
It's my real pleasure, actually. And it's good to interview somebody who is a native Australian as well.
Oh yeah, mate. There's only 22 million of us or something. We've got to try and get ourselves out there somehow to the world.
Yeah. We're going to get stuck into the interview, but before I do, I'll just tell the viewers and the listeners a little bit about what you do. And what it is that you do is that you help people improve their rheumatoid arthritis symptoms so as to have a better quality of life, live in less pain, and require less medication. After recovering from a severe form of rheumatoid arthritis yourself, you're now one of the world's leading authorities in natural approach for reversing inflammatory arthritis. Mate, it's so good to have somebody like you so close to home, and now we're going to share what you know to the rest of the planet. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm not your classic kind of medical expert who comes at this with a PhD in rheumatology or something like that. I'm someone who went through the most excruciating multiple years and had to really get to the bottom of what was going on with my disease because the answers weren't coming to me through an education that I'd had or through education that the medical professionals were giving me. So I'm someone who has a relentless and never-ending determination to try and solve problems. And my education is actually laser physics. So I come at this from a background of science. My degree is actually a Bachelor of Technology in optoelectronics, which is the light associated with optical fibers and lasers and things. And I got the highest thesis grade that had ever been issued at my university in the Department of Maths, Physics, Computing, or Electronics. So
The
I was well
room's just starting
educated.
to get small, mate. The room's starting to get small.
So look, but let me just offset that with after being following up my education, I then went into the startup world. I was an engineer hired into a company here in Sydney, and then after a couple of years, I had 100 staff working for me as a production manager for these small components that were being shipped to a worldwide technology boom. Anyway, after doing that for sort of 5 years, I then, just to put a completely different spin on my sort of career, I then moved into entertainment, and I found a passion for making people laugh. And I've been involved with stand-up comedy and being a professional stand-up comedian for 17 years now. So I've made a great living out of that, traveled to 16 countries performing, entertaining the troops in Iraq, and I've performed in Hawaii and Ireland and, oh God, Solomon Islands and you name it. Yeah, so it's just been a very interesting career that's taken me on cruise ships and country towns, and yeah, so it's been very eye-opening. And so the benefit of having sort of a problem-solving kind of education and then a career that gave me a lot of spare time, I was able to treat my health condition with the utmost of attention and try and work out what the bloody hell was going on with my body because it was attacking itself.
Yeah, awesome. I love the way you came into problem solving and the way that you got to, well, let me put this problem solving thing that I'm good at doing into solving my own problem. I mean, that's awesome. Rather than putting that out to somebody else to solve your problem for you, which is what we do with doctors. Now, I wouldn't be here without doctors and hospitals and all that kind of stuff. I absolutely needed them to be the ones to open my head and operate on me, right? I wouldn't want to be doing that on my own. But when I went home, there were certain things that I couldn't do, that I could do that they couldn't help me with, which was inform me about how I go about stroke recovery, healing my brain after, the challenges that I went through. And that was my responsibility. So I had to do that. And I went on a similar problem solving process as you. And before you tell me about how you got to eventually sort of getting to that point where you're really, really well these days, is tell me what actually is rheumatoid arthritis and how did you experience it?
Yeah, so what it is, it's an autoimmune disease. So there's about 100 different of these intricate, complexly titled diseases called autoimmune diseases. Things like rheumatoid arthritis and Crohn's disease and ankylosing spondylitis, and they are a situation where the body is confused and is attacking its own cells. So another, for example, is type 1 diabetes. And so the body is attacking part of its own tissues, and consequently that part of the body suffers and begins to deteriorate. And so with rheumatoid arthritis, the chosen enemy within the body is the lining around the joints. And so what you have is a very inflamed, swollen, red set of joints throughout your body, and they are very, very painful, hard to move, and they stiffen up. So you feel like when it's in your feet that you're walking on shards of glass. That's the feeling that you get when you're walking on your feet. And throughout the rest of the body, it's hard to describe because it's such an unnatural form of pain. Like, it's not the sort of pain that you kind of feel when you say bump your elbow and it feels okay. There's a pain there. It's a familiar pain. You sort of feel that pain, and you know that it'll go away and that your body will heal. With an autoimmune pain in your joints, it's a very foreign feeling, and it's very irritating because you know that the source of that pain is coming from your own body, and you can't just walk away from it because you are actually causing it. And it's very, very unsettling. So I had it, quite severe throughout my whole body, and just to, answer your question and not to take it too much further, is that it's just swollen joints that can end up in surgeries. And for me, I had to have elbow surgery, my left elbow. I was looking at a knee replacement when I was just 34 years old, which I managed to avoid narrowly because I worked a lot of the problems out just in time. But yeah, man, it's a tremendously debilitating condition. And within 10 years, something like 15% of people with RA have to leave the workforce. And certainly a lot of people that I now coach through, my reach are at beyond that stage. And I help them trying to, I just got one person back to work recently, which was amazing. So yeah, man, it's a shocking disease that's debilitating.
You know what? You look like a pretty young bloke. And you mentioned the number 34. How old were you when you started to experience this? Because rheumatoid arthritis, what happens to old people, man?
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because on the flip side, you can get rheumatoid arthritis even as a child. And the youngest child that I've worked with who's got the disease is about 2.5. So these poor little children get this autoimmune condition, and then they get the same drug options as the adults. And I know that as an adult, these drug options are some of the worst that you could ever want. They're cancer drugs. That's where you start. You start with the cancer drugs, and then you work your way up into these other immunomodulating drugs that have side effects that, quite frankly, can end your life. So, I mean, the spectrum of drugs go from terrible to extraordinarily terrible. And the children get offered the exact same combo of drugs. So it's challenging. So the reason you can get it at a young age is because it's an autoimmune. It's not your body just slowly getting wear and tear arthritis like osteoarthritis or old age arthritis, this sort of thing. This is something where your body's made a mistake and your body's attacking itself. And the mechanisms behind it somewhat complex, but certainly something we can talk about if you want, or we can go into other directions, however you want to run it.
Mate, I want people to know what causes it. Now, I have a thyroid condition, so I have an underactive thyroid.
Hypothyroidism.
Hypothyroidism, my friend.
Hashimoto's.
Not Hashimoto's. Yep. Thank God It's not Hashimoto's.
Okay.
I've been tested and did all of that stuff. But what happened to me was one of the thyroid glands was really enlarged. It was about the size of a cricket ball. For the viewers overseas or the listeners overseas, a baseball. And we had to get to the point where it was interfering with my esophagus and my windpipe. It had moved it by about 6 centimeters to that side.
Wow.
So we needed to make sure that my windpipe and my esophagus weren't compromised any further and over a long period of time. So remove that half, and that half of the thyroid gland put me into a space where I'm hypothyroid. And even though I was hypothyroid, I put on a little bit of weight, but I wasn't putting on an excessive amount of weight because, like you, I've done 4 years of researching how I'm going to heal my brain, and I'm pretty sure we did some similar things, but that's a different story for another day. And what I've been able to do is I've been able to manage all of the most debilitating part of the symptoms, and I take a little bit of thyroxine, which helps my body, regulate my hormones. So that's about the only thing that I take. I'm not putting on weight. And I got to this point pretty much doing my own research, and the hardest part for me, and I wonder what happened with you, but the hardest part for me was I went and paid what I consider a lot of money for half an hour, $200 to go and see a specialist who was dealing with the endocrine system, so endocrinologist. And when I asked the question, what causes a thyroid gland to stop functioning properly or become enlarged, the answer was nothing. Nothing causes it. And I was dumbfounded. I was like, well, how could you possibly say that nothing causes it? There's got to be something. And from that, instead of getting offended or taking it the wrong way, what I understood was that the medical profession had one approach to it, and that was, well, big, not working, or cancerous, we just take them out. And that's the one approach. That's the solution for everything. Then we put you on medication for the rest of your life. And I'm curious how it was that you went about the process of being diagnosed, and then what your experience was with the medical profession. And I'm going to go back to, remember what I said was, without the medical profession, when I had my brain stuff, I'd be dead. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the way the medical professional approaches it. I'm just saying that people's experiences are similar. I'm wondering if yours was the same.
So my rheumatologist was outstanding. One of the issues with getting a inflammatory arthritic condition is that it's very hard to see the specialists. You can spend sometimes 2 to 3 months on a waiting list. Around the world, I've seen this consistent. Doesn't matter which country you're in, there always seems to be a 2 to 3 month turnaround to get to see the doctor. And then when you do see the doctor, there can be a great deal of skepticism in the doctor's minds with regard to any kind of alternative to medical treatment and their treatment. And now I got very lucky because my rheumatologist was absolutely outstanding. And my wife and I were just talking about this the other night for the first time in ages, just how good he was at basically humoring me and allowing me to go off and try my various experiments, which they were. Now, he diagnosed me by just doing a physical exam. So you investigate the range of motion of the joints, and he puts a little pressure with his thumb and forefinger into the joints, and also through a series of blood tests, which I'd actually already had done from my GP. The blood tests they look for with rheumatoid arthritis are a couple of things called rheumatoid factor and anti-CCP, and they're indicators of the presence of the disease in your body. And also then they look at the inflammation markers, liver enzymes, all sorts of stuff. So C-reactive protein and SED rate are a couple of markers that they used. So I was elevated across the charts, and my markers were extraordinarily high. So my rheumatoid factor was in the multiple hundreds, so was anti-CCP, and I was in a fairly severe case when I went in and was suggested in my very first visit to go onto the cancer drug of methotrexate. And just to sort of follow that story along a little bit, I then, thought, I had never actually even broken a bone prior to that point. I'd never had any other health condition of any kind. I was a cross-country champion at school. I was the sports captain at my university college. I ran the Sydney City to Surf for the very first time without actually having trained, and was in the top 5,000 out of the 100,000 runners. And I don't even think I warmed up like stupid, right? I just
You're
went
one of
there
those guys that just takes the sport like a duck to water. I hate people like you.
Right. So And here I was at 31. So I'm 41 now. So 10 years ago, 31, I've walked into the rheumatologist office and he said this drug and then this, and it's going to be, how bad the whole thing is. And in the first meeting, I said to him, has anyone ever gotten rid of this? And he's like, not that I've known since I've been working in my practice. Now, he is at the end of his career. So we're talking thousands of patients that he has seen in a lifetime, multiple decades. And anyway, I thought, okay, now it's suddenly dawning on me how serious this is. And so anyway, I said, look, give me some time before I start taking this drug. And remarkably, one of the recommendations from early on was to take antibiotics. And this is where we're getting in the crux of the cause, okay? Because even 10 years ago, when I was diagnosed, which now, it sounds so long ago, but it just doesn't, going through this just still has a raw, short feeling to it, But when he started suggesting some antibiotics in conjunction with the methotrexate, alarm bells went off, because when I was a teenager, I took 5 consecutive years of antibiotic dose for my acne as a teenager. Okay? Now, I've since seen through my own surveys, and I've got a survey running through all of my clients. I only started about 6 months ago. I've got 300 responses now just through new people uptaking our program who've filled out the survey response, that long-term antibiotic use seems to be the number one risk factor for developing rheumatoid arthritis.
Wow, wow.
Right. So now this is stuff that I actually don't believe is in any publication in the medical community, because I have a unique viewpoint, because I have people coming to me wanting to have natural solutions and sharing all of their past dietary changes, their exercise regimes, and giving me some anonymous, because I'm not going to be sharing any names or anything, data that I can use from a statistical point of view. And that was profound, because it's not just me. It comes up time and time again. Long-term antibiotic use is an enormous issue, way beyond what we think. So anyway, short-term, again, antibiotics, wonderful. Long-term, big danger. So I'd been on those antibiotics for a long time. So when he said to me, hey, I want to get you on this doxycycline, I looked at him and I'm like, where do I know the words doxycycline? That's the stuff that I took for 5 years when I was a teenager. And here's the big punchline. The same year I got diagnosed, just months before, I'd been over to Iraq and entertained the troops over there. And the anti-malaria drug you have to take whilst deployed is doxycycline.
Wow.
And so months prior to getting my rheumatoid arthritis, I went back on the doxycycline that I had been on earlier in my life. And before I knew it, I was wiped out with joint pains and began my rheumatoid arthritis. So is it the only thing that brought it on for me? No, because you have to have a lifestyle that also supports that kind of disease. And a footnote to that, with regards to the kids, it gets complicated with the children, but I have answers for those as well. But for the majority of us, there are lifestyle choices we can make which minimize the chances of getting such a disease. Not completely eliminates, but minimizes. And I wasn't using a disease minimizing diet, right? And so with the terrible antibiotic use and a non-disease minimizing diet, I got the autoimmune disease. And so I spent 12 months trying to not use the drugs and trying to reverse the disease naturally. And in that 12 months, I just worsened and worsened and worsened. I outsourced my condition to every naturopath, and I went to homeopaths, and I even went to like Moree to go to mud baths up in the northern central coastal region of New South Wales. We're in Fiji, and I'm going in mud baths every day trying to use whatever this mineral content mud baths are to relieve pains. I mean, I even had a naturopath run electrical currents through me every week for several months. We spent thousands of dollars with this naturopath because he was targeting particular microbes in me with certain frequencies of electrical currents, none of which I could feel, but were below the level of sensation. But I mean, I was trying everything. The one thing I didn't go crazy with was with my diet and exercise, which are now the two pillars of my recommendations to everyone. The two pillars, the two things that I did only small amounts of changes on.
All right.
Right?
We'll talk about that in a moment. I want to go back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What do antibiotics do that create such a high risk of rheumatoid arthritis? What do they actually do other than get rid of the blocked and stuffed up nose when you go to the GP and get prescribed and get rid of pimples and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so they're non-discretionary. Antibiotics just are like an atomic bomb on your healthy gut bacteria and take out all the good guys with the bad guys. They're like a monkey with a machine gun running around just killing everything, right? And they kill well. And so we're meant to have about 2 kilograms or a little under of healthy bacteria inside our gut, right? We actually have like 100 to 1 number of bacteria, living organisms inside us as cells, I should say, as opposed to human cells. We're actually, it can get really kind of like bizarre when you start watching TED Talks and stuff about people who are experts in bacteria and stuff, because they can sometimes go as far to quite accurately say that we're actually a bacterial species with a human form. I mean, we're that much driven by bacteria. So it gets a bit wacky, and we'll keep it a little bit more straight and narrow. But what happens when you're dropping these atom bombs on your gut bacteria is that you end up with a wasteland of what's meant to be a complete ecosystem of vibrant bacterial life forms. Mm-hmm. And instead of that, you've taken out the rainforest, you've cut down everything, and all you're left with is this space where pathogens can thrive, right? Okay, so what actually happens with rheumatoid arthritis and autoimmune diseases in general is that particles that are meant to be confined to your intestinal tract end up moving through the walls of your intestine and into your bloodstream. Now, under normal healthy conditions, this is how we receive our energy. We move digested proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, right, into our bloodstream, and from those we get energy and we rebuild proteins and fats. And so this is how our body is designed to work when those particles are really, really small in their most finite, smallest components. So fats become fatty acids, and carbohydrates become simple sugars, and proteins become amino acids. All of these things in the blood, happy days, right? But when an incompletely digested protein enters the bloodstream, the body can see that as an enemy, because we're not meant to have whole proteins inside our blood. They're not meant to be there, right?
Right, nice.
So the body sees this protein floating around in the blood, and it says that's an enemy. And what it does is it starts shooting the enemy with with antibodies from the body. It attaches to it actually and tries to move it out of the body. The big problem occurs when those proteins look very similar to some part of our body, okay? So in the case of rheumatoid arthritis, those proteins look very similar to the proteins of the lining of our joints. And the reason that this is quite, commonsensical is that there's only 22 amino acids, right? So it's like the letters of the alphabet. There's only so many different proteins that we can actually make in nature, because all proteins are made up of the same finite number of amino acids, right? And so you're going to get some proteins that look very similar to proteins in your own tissues. And when you're consuming animal-based proteins, particularly cow's milk is a good example, then the proteins in that milk can look a lot similar to that of human tissue. And then we have to have a predisposition to a certain a certain name or certain part of our body that's going to get attacked. And for me, it was the lining of the joints, but the same mechanism is at play with other autoimmune diseases. And so the body just attacks the one that you are, I guess, genetically weakest. And so that's what's going on. And so you asked, how do the antibiotics play a role in this? Well, bacteria help to keep the integrity of the gut wall. And so they help to create what's called the tight junctions, and so that stuff can't get through in the gaps. And so bacteria are very important in this process. So they do a lot of things, but that's one of the things. They also create vitamins. They also link to our energy levels, all sorts of stuff. But that's the one that matters most when we're dealing with autoimmune disease. So if you start dropping bombs on them, you're susceptible to big things, not just autoimmune diseases, but all sorts of problems.
So the gut bacteria prevent leaky gut.
They do.
Right? And leaky gut is now how the condition is described when particles that are not meant to be inside of your bloodstream, inside of your body, that are meant to be contained in your gut from your esophagus right down to your anus, when they escape, when they're not meant to be anywhere else but inside your gut, and they escape and go into the bloodstream, that is because what we've done through diet, through use of antibiotics, is compromise the gut lining, which keeps all the junk in. It's allowed some of that junk to go out. That junk mimics some proteins that are not supposed to be in our bloodstream. The immune system says, hey, that's not supposed to be here. Let's attack it. And then the immune system attacks that protein that's not supposed to be there, but that looks like a protein of a joint or a thyroid gland or anything else, and it says, well, let me eliminate all of those as well. So the body's going, hey, I'm doing a good thing here, but it doesn't know the difference between what is an invasive protein and what is a protein that's meant to be there to help us. How does that sum it up?
You got it. That's exactly correct. And then what's fascinating is that once you stop the crap entering into the bloodstream, and I say crap, like it's just, a lot of it is food particles that have just been incompletely digested. A lot of it, however, is, pathogenic bacteria. And there's a little sort of refinement, or an addition, I should say, to our definition here, is that sometimes the proteins in the lining of bacteria as well can trigger. And this is a little bit more difficult to conceive because of the size. I always thought a bacteria might have been bigger than a protein might be bigger than a bacteria, but it's not the case at all. The proteins are very small. The bacteria can have proteins in its lining of its shell around the outside. And this also can create problems with the immune system. And so what's really interesting, and this is where the crux of my whole approach lies. And this is the fuel that made me so determined that I could heal this disease, is because when you stop eating, when you have rheumatoid arthritis, the pain completely goes away. Okay, now this is profound. This is so profound that in the absence of having stuff entering the bloodstream, the body stops its attack.
Wow.
Okay. Now, I could say with a fair degree of confidence that 95% of rheumatologists that treat this disease around the world don't know that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I would think my opinion would be the same, that 95% of rheumatologists definitely wouldn't know that. And that's why they wouldn't know that is beyond me, but it's a topic for another discussion. But the interesting thing about what you say is that when somebody recovering from a brain injury doesn't eat, that process of not eating in that short period of time releases a product called ketones, releases ketones, and ketones are created by the body to supply the brain with energy in times of famine, and as a result of that, what happens is to the brain is the inflammation from the sources the inflammation that we put in via the food, like you said, is decreased, and the brain starts to heal and recover, even though the person's not eating. So I can completely relate to that.
Yep.
And we're starting to hear word and talk about how a ketosis an inducing diet supports brain health. And it doesn't surprise me that perhaps similar mechanisms are going on when somebody suffering from rheumatoid arthritis decides, man, I can't be bothered eating right now. I'm not going to eat. I'm going to go on a fast for a little while.
Yeah. One of the issues with most people with rheumatoid, there's two extremes normally with their weight. Those who have developed an understanding about the pain and food consumption relationship all end up skinny, because when you've worked out that the more you eat, the more pain you're in, over a long period of time, you're naturally making choices to eat less food or to eat less calories. Wow. And whether it's subconscious or conscious, that's what you see. You see a lot of skinny people with rheumatoid arthritis. And making matters worse is that these skinny folks find it hard to exercise because they don't have a lot of muscle mass to support their body weight and movements of their joints, and it hurts to move their joints, so they are exercise avoidance. And so this is a problem in itself. And then the other flip side is that drugs like prednisone really add weight to your body and blow out and give you a moon face and all sorts of stuff. So you kind of got these fatty face drug taken sort of prednisone consumers, and then you've got the people who are on the other side of it, on the thin side, because they're so aware of the fact that the foods are giving them pain. Even though they might not know which foods, they just go with a I'm not going to eat too much kind of approach.
Yeah, it's kind of like the body going into this sort of instinctive phase of going, hey, food association, pain, let's just not let him think about it, but let's just make him eat less. And as a result, we'll have less pain. We'll go for it. It's the body again trying to go another step of self-healing, but we haven't worked it out yet. We haven't potentially paid attention to what our body's saying. That's right.
And I like what you were talking about with regards to not eating, with regards to going into the, ketosis. And one author that I love, and I hope to interview him in the coming year, his name is Hiromi Shinya, and he wrote a book called The Enzyme Factor. And in The Enzyme Factor, he has this lovely little, he's a Japanese man, a gastroenterologist. His whole career is looking up people's colons. So you can imagine, I'm sure he's fun at, parties. But he has a lot of these eloquently put expressions that come from that kind of humble Japanese background. And he has one that I love. It's called "Make Friends with Gentle Hunger." Wow. And the reason that he says that is he says because it takes 10 metabolic enzymes to convert to create one digestive enzyme. So our body has all these enzymes that we use for all functioning. Everything I'm doing right now is using enzymes, from blinking to talking to moving, everything, right? And so they're all metabolic enzymes. The digestion requires digestive enzymes, and they are able to convert back and forth. The body is able to repurpose the enzymes. And the digestive enzymes require 10 times as many. And so it's hard to digest food and do a whole lot of anything else.
Wow.
And so it's a big consumer of the body's resources when we're breaking down food. So if we give our gut a break, we are just giving our whole body a tremendous relief and an opportunity to heal, to repair, to calm down inflammation. And it's a wonderful thing. So in a society where 60% of people are overweight, I mean, why the heck isn't every person who's in that category taking a meal off once a week?
Yeah, let me go back to what my mum used to tell me about fasting, that if I fasted, I would go to heaven, But it turns out that the people that invented religion and all the different versions of religion over the decades, over the hundreds of thousands of years that we've been on the planet, who thought that fasting was a good idea, turns out that they may not have had the science to explain why fasting is good, but they must have realized that when my population or my flock or my parish fasts for a month or a week or whatever it is over a period of a year, what happens is their health improves. They just get better.
That's it.
So why
So
don't we
true.
make it about God? Why don't we say that God said you need to fast? But now that the God message is kind of getting lost in this new age world that we live in, we need to start talking about things like the things that religions teach, but from a different perspective so that people can relate to it, especially the people that aren't that way inclined.
Yeah, sure. I mean, everyone comes back to me and says, I want to see the science. And so all morning this morning, coincidentally, it's not because I wanted to share this on the podcast, but just this morning, coincidentally, I've gone way back into the science again. I've been working on a new guide for rheumatologists because every doctor who my clients go to see for themselves says, I'm doing this program, I'm making great results. And they say, oh, look, there's still no evidence to support any dietary impact on. And they say, I want to see the science. Well, wait till they see this. I mean, I've got this, put together this massive summary that's just a one-page document that summarizes all this. And so doctors want to see the science, right? And so I'm creating a big arc here, but I'm coming back to what you just touched upon. But it's hard to work out what the general public want to be able to, make their health choices, because you tell someone that they're ruining the planet by eating red meat every day and basically having an enormous meat intake diet, for instance, no one cares. You tell them that same sort of diet with something. You tell them that veal whatever was a young calf and show them pictures. Like, they don't really care. They're disassociated. But what motivates them is when they're in physical pain. And I think that a religion also can drive someone to make the right changes. But other than pain, I don't know what can.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know. People will lie on a table and have a chainsaw go through their chest to have bypass surgery rather than eating a bean burrito. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. And people will go and opt for the surgery that makes the stomach smaller so that they can lose weight, than just stop eating carbs, for example, or drinking 10 liters of beer or whatever it is, right? So it is interesting, and I find that as well, because now I'm fully aware. My approach is very similar to yours, and I coach people that are recovering from brain injuries, whether they're traumatic brain injuries or strokes or whatever they are, to heal their brain. And as a result, what they achieve is they achieve control of their condition and a better long-term outcome, rather than just this short-term, we've stitched your head up, go back home, and she'll be right, whatever happens happens. So what I understand now, because of what I did to myself with nutrition, with smoking, with working too much, with drinking too much, with being a standard Aussie bloke that grew up going out, eating out, and stuffing around with my mate. What I did to myself was preventable. And I don't say that just because I think it's preventable, because the World Stroke Organization says that 95% of strokes are preventable, which means that if we can find a way to motivate people and let them see the future, which is painful after stroke, which is painful with rheumatoid arthritis, then we perhaps can get them to take action. But my message falls on deaf ears as well, because the people that I talk to, my direct family members, mum, dad, my wife, everybody, are not experiencing that right now. And because they're not experiencing that right now, it's not a priority to take action. So if your roof isn't leaking, but there's a cracked tile, yeah, well, it's no big deal. When it rains and we have a downpour and it starts leaking, and now it's damaged the ceiling, well, yeah, it's going to cost more. It's going to take more time, more money, more effort. But yeah, I'll do something about it right now, because I actually saw it leak and it actually did make my ceiling fall in. So this kind of process that the preventative process, I'm not sure either. And I kind of feel like maybe we're losing that preventative talk battle unless you're a government department that has hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to throw at the non-smoking, the no smoking kind of process. I think that the best thing that you and I can do is say, I lived through this. It wasn't pleasant. If you know somebody living through this, suggest that they pay attention, listen to this podcast, to Clint's podcast, whoever's podcast, take some notes, get them to help themselves. And then the biggest question I get when I present about stroke is people say to me, is it hereditary? And what's interesting is that people don't like it when I say, no, stroke is not necessarily hereditary. Stupidity is hereditary. And they look at me and they go, what does that mean? And I say to them, well, if your dad's dad, your dad's brothers and uncles and their dad all died of a stroke, and you're doing what they all did, is there a chance that you will suffer the same outcome? And that is the only message that kind of gets people thinking about prevention, because they see it as, okay, so what they did perhaps caused that. With the statistic of 95% of strokes are preventable, they kind of see it as, oh, okay, so maybe I should change my ways and not just do the smoking, the drinking, the excessive everything, because that might end up to where everyone else came, rather than, and then as a result of that, it's a better conversation than, hey guys, prevent rheumatoid arthritis, prevent cancer, prevent stroke, prevent heart disease, prevent all of that kind of stuff. Now, I love what you do, and that's why I wanted to interview you. I know only a small amount about you, but I got to feel that what you are is passionate about supporting people once they've been on the terrible part of the journey. And if that leads to people, to you also creating prevention, and I think it will, I think that's kind of the bonus. But the work needs to be done on the people that are suffering now, is the way I see it. And that's why I do what I do. So
what you've described is exactly the same as myself. I've never used something publicly quite as strong as stupidity is hereditary, but you're accurate with that. But absolutely, man, it's hard to look. I don't even know if I would have taken upon a message, a sort of message that I talk about now, before it happened to me, because I think we all feel immune to things going wrong. We all feel like we're superheroes and nothing can impact on our health, and it'll always happen to someone else. And it's I think that it goes beyond the scope of what you and I are capable of right now. But certainly on the disease management, reversal, definitely, or improvement path, coaching, I think we share similar views.
Yeah, I love it. So we are. I really want to give a few people some tips about what to do. They've just been diagnosed. Let's talk about day one. They've had the diagnosis and they've happened to come across your podcast, or they've come across this episode here. What do we tell them?
Well, it's really, everything's up to them. That's the bottom line. It's how much do you want to take responsibility for having discipline in your life, to managing what you eat, how you exercise, how much stress you want to bring into your lifestyle with your job, your personal relationships, versus whether or not you just want to take medications and then manage the ongoing battle with side effects and drugs failing. So you've got, it's and somewhere in between those two camps, because I believe that let's say case A is do as much as you can to be as healthy as possible to require the least amount of medications, because that will be the outcome. A dramatic amount of effort into becoming as healthy as possible will require less meds. Or, just defer it to the medications, as I said, and which would be case B. Now, both of them suck. It is a disease that my doctor said of all the diseases I would not want to get, that would be at the top of my list. He said that to me, right? And so it sucks. However, you can, if you apply incredible determination and absolute commitment, get to a point where you might be able to manage the disease virtually symptom-free without medications, okay? However, that's like, a small percentage on case A, and then, or you can, as I said, just case B, right? Medications, and there's a lot of challenges with that. That's not a happy path. And so what I would say after saying that to someone who's newly diagnosed, this is the tips that I would do straight away. Let's say we're leaving a plane. I've been sitting next to them on the plane. I'll never see them again, and we're going in different directions at baggage claim.
And they were so lucky to sit next to you. They nailed the seat, right? God, right. The universe put them in your seat.
Okay, here's what I would say. I would say that, and this might contradict with some of the things that you teach your listeners with regards to what needs to be done with stroke recovery. But this is what you need to do when you've got an autoimmune disease. You must go on a low-fat, plant-based diet. So that means you've got to eliminate all animal products, because animal products, even lean chicken, is 30% fat by calories. And we must have a low-fat diet for autoimmune conditions, right? And so we must go on a plant-based diet. Now, people freak out, what on earth am I going to eat? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward, and you can get most of your calories from rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, beans, legumes, lentils, all that sort of stuff, right? And eat tremendous amounts of leafy green salads. So I'm talking bok choy, baby spinach, cos lettuce, anything that's a leafy green plant that grew that goes into salads. That is your number one greatest friend, because not only is it absolutely tremendously rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. It's very, very alkalizing, and it's a prebiotic, so it feeds your healthy gut bacteria. And that's one of the points here, is all the foods that are in plant-based foods all contain fiber. And nothing creates a culture of happy bacteria more than fiber. They live off fiber. And so our aim is to have as much plant matter in our intestines as possible for our little bugs to eat on it. And the diversity of the fiber can affect diversity of the bugs, and we know that diversity of bugs equals health. That's been proven across all cultures and research done in all the microbiome studies. And so we want to have a large diversity of gut bacteria, and we want large volumes of healthy gut bacteria. So we feed them lots of slight variations of their favorite food, which is plants, and especially leafy greens. Now, if someone's listening only did that, 50% of their inflammation will be gone by the end of the week, and it will stay that way. And I'm talking, doesn't matter how long you've had the condition, 50% of your pain will go in a week just by doing that. Okay, now what about the other 50%? Well, then it gets a lot harder. Okay, I wanted not 50% gone, I wanted 100% gone, right? That was my goal. So what I did then is I had to experiment and work out, well, what can I eat that doesn't give me pain? Even if I stay within a high fiber-rich plant-based paradigm. That took me years. It took me years to work out. And what I did in those years is settle upon, after doing a raw food vegan diet for 8 months, which was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I actually don't recommend clients do it, even though it was very effective for me. It's just too dangerous. Like, I lost so much weight. I mean, it's just not a sustainable diet in my personal view. Mm-hmm. After doing that, I then shifted across onto a completely alkalizing, what I call a baseline diet, a set of foods that are very simple, that gave me the lowest amount of pain, that I could have the highest nutritional concentration. So although it was a restrictive diet, it wasn't creating malnutrition, right? And for me, that was a combination of buckwheat, which is a pseudo grain, quinoa, and another thing called amaranth. And these are actually seeds, right? They're seeds off a plant. And so I would cook them all up together based on, again, the advice from Dr. Hiromi Shinya, because he found that the healthiest intestines and the most beautiful digestive systems he ever saw were for those people who consumed these pseudo grains and also brown rice and these sort of things on a regular basis. So I went down that path. And so I would say to the person, look, if you want to challenge, just go low fat, plant-based. If you want to take it to a whole new level, you're going to have to go through a baseline period where you drop your pain levels even further and then test foods back into your diet, because you have different food sensitivities than the next person, than me, than anyone else who has this. And so we need to just do food challenging back into your diet. It sounds like so laborious, and it's as laborious as it sounds.
Yeah.
And I've created a guide that helps people do this, but even the reintroduction process is still only a suggested sequence. And within the suggested sequence, people need to find their own, like a choose your own adventure path. And so I might present to them a range of around 10 to 15 foods for say, stage 2, stage 3. And within those, they can choose from those foods. So what else I would tell them is I would say that food for people with chronic inflammation is only going to get you 60% of the way, no matter how hardcore you go into this process. I mean, you can go raw vegan like I did, which is, I believe, the most aggressive pain reduction approach. That isn't going to get you the whole way, even then, if you've got chronic rheumatoid arthritis. And the other 40% is exercise. And I say you've got to think about exercise as if you're training to compete in some kind of event that's extremely important to win. And so you don't need to be capable of much sort of, amazing physical abilities. You just need to give it everything you've got. So this means scheduling exercise and doing it every day. It means doing, where possible, working up to this, at least 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise every day, which sounds hard, but it's not really. You just go to the gym and jump on a push bike at the gym and stay on it for 30 minutes and you're done. I mean, it's not that hard, right? Go for a swim each day for 30 minutes. At first, people might just be going to hydrotherapy classes. They might just be standing in the water and moving their arms, because these are people with serious challenges, right? But it's got to build and build and build. We need to be an extremely fit, highly exercised, disciplined, plant-based human being, and we will have the lowest medications that we need to balance off or to complete the pain reduction.
Yeah, I love it. And yes, it is completely different from what the world's leading neurologists will talk about recommending to get better brain health, especially when you're recovering from a brain injury. Brain injury people are starting to be told high fat, high protein diet, include all of the leafy greens and veggies. That's a standard thing, but they're told to make sure they increase their fat consumption, because that helps to heal neurons and heal. There's a specific purpose for it, and it sounds like there's a specific purpose for what you're talking about. And everyone is different, and every condition is different, and not one diet helps everybody for every condition. Absolutely not. And that's what I like about it. It's different. So pay attention to the differences and be that version of yourself for that period of time while you're healing. And then, you know what? If you feel like not eating a plant-based diet for a week or whatever, or you're going to go on a holiday and you want to splurge, see what it's like, give it a try, and then just ask your body how it feels. And if your body's going, mate, what are you doing to me? Then just, you know what you've got to do. You've got to sort of ease back off it. and then just keep testing the waters. If there's something that you must have, if you must have that steak, well then, keep testing the waters until you can have it effectively. But in my in my recovery, it was all about my recovery. Everything else was second. I wasn't interested in, the short-term gratification. We were all about the long-term results. And then came the ability to introduce foods back into my diet that I hadn't been eating. But I'm still off grains like wheat and gluten-containing grains. Tell me what your thoughts are on that for rheumatoid arthritis, beer especially.
Yeah, and let me just add that anyone who wants to see the science on any of this, I can provide all of this. I mean, this isn't stuff that I'm just flipping out trying to share my personal opinions here. This is stuff that has been well documented, and the reason I thought to add that is because cereal grains containing gluten are very problematic for people with rheumatoid arthritis. It's just a challenging protein, gluten. Gluten is just a protein that's a little harder to digest than most of the other proteins. It's a long structure. And so my view on it is that I don't think gluten is all the enemy that everyone makes it out to be. I think that everyone eats such a crap diet, has poor exercise habits, as you said earlier, drinks, smokes, and what happens is the gut is compromised. And what happens when you get a compromised anything is what happens is the thing that's hardest to deal with is the first thing that it finds it can't do anymore. And the first thing it can't do anymore is digest this bloody long protein that's coming in, right? And so we say we've got gluten sensitivity. Well, yes, you do, but why? It's because your gut's a mess from eating all that crap and all the lifestyle choices that you make. Okay, so gluten itself's not the problem. Our lifestyle has created a condition that means that we're pathetic at breaking down a little plant protein.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay?
Awesome.
And okay, so this means that I have all my clients avoid gluten as well, right? Because they're in that position. We can't reverse that at the moment. That's going to take time. But what we see is that people who are very compliant to the reintroduction process, to their exercise, what happens with time is that a portion of those people are then able to reintroduce gluten-containing foods again. The first one that most people seem to be able to handle is oats. And so there seems to be a little bit more of a soft landing back into a gluten-containing food via oats than what there are, say, just to go straight into, say, wheat. So, yeah, that's something that seems to come up quite a lot. And so people eating just normal wheat-based breads and stuff, I can't say that too many of my clients are at that point, but certainly a lot of them are back eating oats again for breakfast, and it's taken a long time, but you can get there. Gluten sensitivity, I believe, is reversible.
Yeah, awesome. We're coming up to the end of the interview, and I just want to work out. I want to give people an understanding of where you were, how bad it was, and where you are now.
Okay, so people can, look online and watch videos of me in agony and hardly able to walk and that, but let me just paint a little picture. So I had the inflammation in all the little metatarsals on the bottom of my feet, joints that you don't even know exist because you don't think about them until they feel like broken glass, right? I had it in those. I had it in my ankles, and in my left knee was an atrocity. I had it in my chest so much that I could actually, with every breath, I would feel pain in my chest. I had it in my jaw, so that with every bite of food, I would get pain. I had it in all my fingers, so I couldn't create a fist, right? So I was like Clory, like that. These two fingers were blown up so much that it looked like, like marbles in my fingers. But I think, the hardest to heal were my elbows because they, at night time, you can't protect them from rolling onto them. And one of the issues amongst the hundreds with rheumatoid is that when you're sleeping, your joints can get into positions that aren't good for them. And you can't sort of prevent it because you're asleep, right? And then you wake up and you've actually caused more problems. So I was like that. I could barely walk. One time I was trying to walk to a comedy show that was only a 5-minute walk from my house. And it took me half an hour to get there because every 20 or 30 steps I had to stop, reset my knee, sit down on a park bench or like bench on the side of the street. And my wife was with me and she was in a panic. I mean, you imagine like your loved one and they can't walk and stuff. I mean, it's shocking stuff. And I was on maximum dose of methotrexate. You know, I said I tried to avoid that drug at the start of this conversation. I ended up going on the maximum dose. I got to the end of that and I was not holding my condition at bay. So I had all those physical symptoms. I was on the maximum dose of methotrexate. My doctor said we need to go to a different drug. I was not able to have children because of the toxicity of methotrexate, means there's no family planning, but all of my options for me, none of which were family friendly, all the other drug options. And so it was at that point that I had that sort of moment, that turning point, like in a film where like, you know, there's no turning back, you know?
Yeah,
That was the point.
Mate.
Yeah, I'm going all in. Yeah, so it was shocking. And now, you know, now I can, my knee doesn't allow me to jog because it's so damaged from the joint from the inflammation that was in there. But I don't have inflammation in my body, but I have damage from where it was, and I have to be careful. I'm not going to take any risks on trying to deviate from the lifestyle changes that I found got me better, because I'm well aware that this disease, once it's turned on, is, you know, at best you're able to not have symptoms. But I don't want to go and mess around and eat cheese pizzas and you know, drink every night, because I'm pretty certain that if I wanted to, I could start to bring pain back into my body.
Yeah.
I don't want.
You're not a glutton for punishment, mate.
No. So it's the expression that serves this best is, you're always going to have some pain in your life, and it's a choice between the pain of discipline versus the pain of regret.
Oh.
And so I'm choosing the pain of discipline for the rest of my life, and I encourage the pain of discipline for all of my clients.
Brilliant. I'm curious. I'm not sure if you've looked into it yet, but I hear a lot of good words about collagen, especially collagen that comes from bone broths, grass-fed animals, and as a result, the bones boiled for 12 to 18 hours to remove the collagen. I've heard that's really good for rebuilding or working towards rebuilding joints, even other tissues in the body, including hair, including everything. Have you looked into that at all? Do you know anything about that at this stage?
Yeah. So obviously I have discussions about that and hundreds of other similar approaches to rebuild gut health every day, because I have a community support forum where I have nearly 300 people who I talk about every day, and all sorts of topics such as that we discuss all day, every day as I work with people. Now, my take on that is that I never used bone broth, and I have almost 8,000 clients, none of which who have used bone broth bar one that I can think of. And my success rate is like no other of anyone in the world, including medical professionals, who can improve the quality of life of people with RA naturally.
Yeah.
And so my response is, well, I didn't. None of the people who've had amazing success in my program used it. And so I actually get very little feedback from it. And I just like the fact that it's not necessary. I just like that. I like that it's a purely, you know, we're living off plants, and we're not harming the planet, and we're not harming animals, and it feels good.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome, mate. That's like I said, it's everyone's different, and it's good to hear different opinions. And I'm sure the people listening and watching are going to really take a lot out of this interview. If they want to connect to you after they've watched this interview, how would they go about doing that?
So our website is clintpaddisonprogram.com, and my spelling is PADDISON, PROGRAM.com. I have a free mailing list on there. So if people just want to get free information from me, I send out emails regularly. I transcribe all my podcasts so that people can read or watch the video versions of them. I have, training via emails. And so the people can really have a great experience and learn a lot without having to spend a cent ever. If they want to buy my program, it's very affordable, and it's also available on that site. If people want to really just have it all put together in an easy to follow format, they can do that as well.
Awesome. Well, what I would encourage people to do who are listening or watching is, if you know somebody with RA, definitely get them to have a look at this video, but then also get them to get in touch with yourself and perhaps jump on the free emailing list, join a forum, exchange ideas, listen to what has helped other people, and maybe that could be a way forward for you to feel better than you've felt maybe in a long time and relieve you of some of the pain and some of the stress that comes with RA, hopefully get you back to work, and hopefully just make your life better. So I think that you're doing an amazing service to the community, and it's kind of interesting that we've got to go through some of our own sort of turmoil, pain and heartache, but then we can offer a lot back. And the people who have recovered and are recovering from your program and other programs, do the same thing, give back, let people know what you did, how you got better, and maybe we can make a difference, and maybe we can influence doctors, specialists and all that kind of stuff to listen and pay attention more to the evidence that is out there, the thousands of people that have recovered and are recovering, because that's evidence too, right, Clint?
I mean, that's it. That's social science, man. We're running it. I'm hoping to do it. Well, I will be doing a documentary this year. So there's going to be all of my archival video footage. I have a lot of video footage of me in agony, and that's all going to be put together and compiled, and we're running a documentary. We're going to be interviewing about a dozen or so of these people who I've mentioned who've made tremendous recoveries. We're going to be interviewing doctors from around the world who are experts in immunology and gut bacteria. And we're going to do a clinical trial and put people through this process, because we want to, I want to change the way the whole industry is running. It's a complete failure right now. And I want the first thing that a rheumatologist says to a patient is, what are you eating and how are you exercising? And based on those answers, develop a plan that's much more supportive to their future than just hitting them immediately with the hardest drug. So 100% Bill, man. It's been fun, and we got a lot of work to do.
We have, mate. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you doing what you're doing, and I really appreciate you being a part of the program.
Thanks for having me.